Right, I think we can get started. Well, welcome everybody to my talk. I'm Dr. Jacob. I'm part of the Chiro team. I joined here at the beginning of 2026. And if you're not here to listen to the longevity equation, how lean muscle mass and chiropractic care can improve your longevity, you might be at the wrong place. So if you are meant to be here, great. So bear with me because I'm working on two computers here, so I will try my best to keep them synced. So we're going to start with an exercise. It's called the physiological sigh. So why? Because two reasons. One, it's going to allow you all to retain this information much better, much more focused, and it's also going to allow me to calm down because I'm speaking in front of people in the first time in a while, probably since school. So we're going to practice this together. So I'll explain it first, and then we can demonstrate it and do it together twice. Okay. So what we will do first is we would all close our eyes. We're going to take as deep of an inhale as we are able to take. And then we're going to hold that for a couple of seconds. And then we're going to inhale a little bit more and then exhale longer than we inhaled. We're going to do that 2 times. So we can begin. Everyone close their eyes. Take a deep inhale. A little bit more. Exhale. One more time. A little bit more. And exhale. You can open your eyes. Congratulations, you all have just decreased the amount of resided anxiety in your body, and you've also improved your heart rate variability. Wonderful. So that comes from a professor by the name of Jack Feldman. He practices out of the research lab at UCLA. So if you're interested more about some of that breath work, you can definitely Google his name, or you can get you those resources. Alrighty, well, a little bit about me. I said a little bit of it already, but I joined the team in Chiro at 2026. I'm from the town of Wilmer, Minnesota, pretty big town if you haven't heard of it. It's a joke. It's about 21,000 people. So it's a little bit bigger than Chippewa Falls, but it is west of the Twin Cities, about 90 miles. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm fourth in that line or lineage. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science in Biology and Health and Medical in 2021 from Moorhead, and then went on to get my doctorate of chiropractic in Northwestern, which, fun fact, myself, Cami, and Lona all went to Northwestern. So we all are from the same school. I practiced in Eau Claire about a year before joining the team here, and decided to join the team here when I noticed I was probably not practicing aligned with my philosophy, which, for those of you that do attend here, know that we hold that to a high standard. And I was married to my lovely wife, Leah. She's in the second row in 2025. All right, let's start with a case study because I try my best not to talk at you. I would love to talk with you so that we can have some beneficial conversation. So this is a case study. So for those of you in the back, if you cannot see super well, it is 3 MRI images. Now I know most of you, if not all of you, probably don't look at MRIs all day, but it's important to see this case study because it's very imperative to what we're talking about today. So in this study, there was hundreds of people. It was performed in 2012, but this popular image came about that study all throughout social media in about 2023, which is interesting because it was 11 years later that this started blowing up. But in these images, they're essentially an axial MRI, which means the image was taken from the head down to the feet. So the imaging is looking down and through the body. These are taken of 3 different individuals, bilateral quad muscles, so pretty thick muscles for most people. And each individual displayed different findings, but each individual also is from a different demographic, a different age group, and a different amount of strength training throughout their weekly habits. So if I had to explain this, and I'm going to gauge your guys's interpretations of these images, but in these images, the darker tissue there is muscle tissue. In the middle one, that's more adipose or fat tissue. That's the lighter tissue. And then similar fat or muscle tissue here. And then the white circle within each of them is the bone or the bone density within the body. So if I had to guess, or if I had to allow you guys to guess, who out of all 3 of those do you feel like is the healthiest? Or who do you feel like has the most muscle mass there? Top one? Yeah, great guess. Anybody else? Any difference or opposing opinions?
I would guess the bottom.
Yeah, and I would think that's a completely valid argument because it's pretty hard to tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of cheated. I covered up what the demographics of each of these people are, right? So I'm going to share with you the top image is an image of a 40-year-old triathlete that trains cardio, strength training, and swimming 3 days a week, right? Now, I know not everybody here is going to go on to be a triathlete, right? But let's talk about this a little bit. That is a 40-year-old. The bottom is a 74-year-old triathlete, which when you think about it, it's crazy, right? Because they don't look a whole lot different. And even some people thought they might have better muscle mass. Now, with that being said, I don't expect everyone in this room to become a triathlete for 34 years, right? Now, that comes down to what your goals are physically, right? And why this is important is because although this is a 74-year-old, the middle one is a 70-year-old who does not strength train at all. Okay.
How old was the middle one?
70 years old, 74, 40, which it's phenomenal to see that difference because this is somebody who's uptake to training up to 3 times a week. It doesn't mean that they're in the gym for 6 to 7 hours each day of the week. And they've maintained drastic similarity to the 40-year-old. Okay. So why that's important is because when we're talking about strength training and muscle mass throughout the body, the use it or lose it principle is entirely true. Okay. So we live in a society that thinks that degeneration is just part of aging, although we'll talk about that briefly in the literature here in a few, partially true. But what you do to combat that is even more true. Okay. So again, I'm going to ask the crowd, does anyone know the number one deciding factor that puts people into assisted living? Fall, that's a great guess. Any other guesses?
Now, not being able to, stand up from a chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Great guess. Strength in general?
For activities of daily living.
Yeah, phenomenal guess. Any others? Say we hit the knob right on the head here. So a half squat, a half rep of being able to sit from a seated position or vice versa. That is the number one thing that sends people into assisted living. Why? Because if they're not strength training and maintaining their muscle mass, that becomes harder and harder and harder to do as we age. Now, I don't expect everyone to be a Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, right? But I make this example because it's important, right? So where did this go wrong? Where did society start to learn this idea that as we age, we degenerate, right? And like I said, part of that's true in the literature, but it's not entirely true, okay? So somewhere along the lines, I can introduce both these people. Most of you in the room probably know who this individual is. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the most popular bodybuilders in the world. And on the right is actually Nick Walker. His nickname is the Mutant. So take that as you will. Now, this is not a talk to bash Nick Walker. He's a great guy. He's just a product of what our society has started to determine health is, okay? So at somewhere along the lines, we started deciding that aesthetics and appearance, or how we look, is more important to actually training for life, or the things that we do, okay? What I mean by that is a lot of strength training has started to go into more isometric training or training individual muscle groups for appearance. Now, that is a terrible way to train because you're not actually training for the things you do throughout your life, right? Whether that's whatever your goals are, right? Are your goals to get on the floor with your grandkids and pick them up and keep up with their pace? Are your goals, to be able to get through a workday sitting in the chair at the office and not feel like crap when you go home? It depends, right? So everyone's goals or physical goals and mental and wellness goals are going to differ, right? Now I say that because I'm 27 years old, right? I haven't lived a full life, right? So what I'm doing is I'm just sharing my information, my knowledge as what I know as a provider so that you can apply it within your goals and your health, your healthy lifestyle, okay? So again, the number on the scale, I think a lot of us have struggled with that at least some point in our lives, right? The number on the scale is completely subjective. As a provider, I've seen people in their best of shape, upwards of 300 pounds. I've seen people in the worst of shape, all the way down at 100 to 120. It just depends on what your actual lifestyle habits, goals, and patterns are, okay? Now, quick fixes, that's going to come next. I'll jump into that. But like I said, degeneration is certainly not a part of getting old, although the research suggests towards it, which is called sarcopenia or osteoporosis. So I'll jump into sarcopenia first. That is the loss of muscle mass in the body. Okay. So within the research, unanimously, it happens at about 3 to 8% each decade after the age of 30. Okay. Now, that happens with no muscle mass or no muscle training, no resistance training, no lifting. Okay. Now, qualitative meta-analysis, which, fun fact, that's just the most well-supported research in the entire world, displays in 2004, I'm going to read it verbatim, says both resistance training and aerobic exercise can be very useful to counteract sarcopenia and associated metabolic alterations and degenerations of the muscle. So if that is in the most peer-reviewed form of research, then where did we get this idea that we just degenerate as we get older? Something to think about, yes? So a necessary conversation on quick fixes. So this is not to point fingers on anybody regarding GLP-1s or semaglutide ejections or pill forms, okay? It's just a really hard topic to avoid in today's society. I can almost guarantee everyone in this room either knows somebody taking one, has taken one themselves, or is currently on them. Is that a fair statement? Yeah, pretty fair statement. Okay, so again, this isn't meant to wave fingers at anybody, but it's meant to educate you guys on what actually is involved in these medications and what they do in the body, because I think true informed consent is unfortunately something that's going away in the healthcare space more and more in today's society. And I think people do need true informed consent in what they're taking, okay? So, for example, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, the list goes on. I could say a bunch, but what they do is they mimic a natural hormone called glucagon. So glucagon is your body's natural hormone that's released by alpha cells. They're within your, let's talk about anatomy, your liver. And what happens is when you've not eaten for a while, your body secretes that glucagon, to raise blood sugar so that you can stay adequate. So when you hear people talking about intermittent fasting or eating less throughout the day, that is the process in which they are trying to achieve. Okay. Now, these drugs are highly, highly effective. I'm sure none of us have any question about that. And they do multiple things, but they decrease appetite. They also delay your body's ability to process throughout the intestinal system. So they delay gastric emptying or going to the bathroom. That's why oftentimes you'll see people prescribed with medications that will allow them to go to the bathroom more when they take these medications more drastically. So because of how effective these medications are, your body or whoever's body is taking these, it struggles to identify how to lose the fat versus how to lose the muscle mass and bone mass. Why? Because it's happening at too rapid of a rate for our bodies to interpret what is actually happening, okay? Now, that leads to more scary conversations like osteoporosis and fractures. So, to dive into that, this year, actually, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, they hold an annual meeting every single year in March. Now, at that meeting, there's a presented study regarding GLP-1s because as orthopedists, they probably see a lot of people on those, right? So this study, although it's preliminary, so it's not published within the research, there's more deeper dives within the research that need to be performed, but it's still alarming. And I'll read this again verbatim. It says patients taking GLP-1 agonist medications have reported a 29% increased risk of developing osteoporosis in lower extremity below the belt fractures to non-users within 5 years. To me, that's striking. Ridiculously striking, okay? And this wasn't a study on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people. This was a study on 143,000 patient records across the United States of America, okay? That gets me a little bit emotional. I don't know about you guys, but strength training, soon after this was discovered, was added to prescription protocols. Interesting, right? So I'll make the example of what these drugs truly do with glucagon. So I'm going to bring this into transactional demonstration because we all spend money, we all save money, and we withdraw money, right? We understand how money works. So think of your body like the bank and think of when you eat something, you process glucose or sugar, that is money, okay? So when that money is either deposited via insulin, which is secreted by beta cells in your liver, your body stores said sugar, right? Now, when your body has not gone or has gone without glucose for too long, it starts to secrete glucagon to raise your blood sugar because you haven't eaten in a while so that we don't pass out, right? So why this is a problem is these drugs mimic the hormone glucagon. And if anyone in this room doesn't know, when you start taking something synthetic that the body already does naturally, The body is ridiculously smart and it's efficient. So it will stop doing that process because you're getting the synthetic version of said process within your body. So what happens is these drugs get called forever drugs. Why? Because as soon as someone goes off of them, their body's natural ability to secrete said glucagon to raise blood sugar when they're fasted no longer happens. That's a scary thing, okay? So I will leave this at this because I don't want this talk to be about this, but the FDA puts a black box warning on these drugs. And a black box warning, for those that do not know, is the highest level of warning in any drug. All throughout, like, that's the most serious, warning you can get on a drug. And it says within the FDA's website, you can look this up, it says serious or life-threatening risks such as death, permanent injury, or hospitalization can occur in taking this drug. And we're prescribing it wildly across the entire nation. Okay, now we can go into more inspiring topics, shall we? So that is just a necessary, painful conversation I do have to have when we're regarding lean muscle mass, okay? So let's talk about what we're truly here to learn about. Lean muscle mass, bone density, and bone health. How does it all tie together? How do we improve it? And is it too late to start? Short answer, absolutely not. Thanks for coming to the talk. No, just kidding. But okay, so bone is living tissue just like anything else in your body, right? So it's just like muscle. It's just like any other organ. It's consistently living. A lot of us, we get the mindset that our bones are static because they don't move. They don't function like the rest of our body, right? So bones break down and they rebuild themselves just like anything else in the body. It's through a process called remodeling. You have cells that are called osteoclasts. They break down your old bone and regenerate new bone. Your osteoblasts are the cells that build said bone, okay? So if you are a mathematician, if your osteoblasts are producing more bone than your osteoclasts are breaking down bone, naturally your bone's going to get healthier and it's going to get stronger. Well, how do we do that, right? So the strength of bones, or what we refer to as bone density, so a lot of us have heard that term, yes, is the measure of amount of minerals within your bones, okay? And whether that's calcium, phosphorus, there's a lot of different minerals within your bones. A lot of us know calcium, right? Because our moms told us to drink it at some point, drink milk for calcium, maybe. Maybe I'm dating that. I don't know. My mom did. She tried her best. Okay, so lean muscle mass and its role in bone strength. So how does the muscle mass in your body contribute to your bones being healthy? So anytime we move or anytime we pull something, we lift something, we pick something up, we push it, we're contracting our muscles. Yes? Yes. So when we contract our muscles, we put micro stressors on the bones that are involved in attaching to those muscles. Okay? Now, that happens when we're active. So, and that doesn't just have to be strength training, it's any type of movement. So whether we're walking, we're running, whatever it might be, right? So the contraction of muscle puts this stress on your bones, but it's actually called hormetic stress. So there's good stressors, and hormetic is one of them. And it happens on a very microscopic level. So when that happens, your bones, they start to spur that osteoblast activity. Why? Because if we're not spurring that osteoblast activity, said activity you're doing, whether that's picking something up, pushing something, this is going to break your bones. So your body starts to signal to those osteoblasts to say, hey, make this more dense. We need support here so that we don't break, right? Now, that's a very watered down example, but that is exactly what your body does, okay? Now, this goes back to the use it or lose it principle we just talked about in those MRIs, right? 40-year-old versus 74-year-old. Isn't that crazy how similar they are? Well, that's because that 74-year-old is consistently giving that micro stress to their bones to support said health, both in the bone and in the muscle tissue. So if you want to break this down to a simple equation, more muscle activity and contraction of said muscles or strength training creates stronger bones. And the same is true for the latter. Muscle activity, less contraction, weaker bones, okay? So let's go a little bit further. So lean muscle mass doesn't just build healthy bone, it protects your bones, okay? So the stronger your muscles are, the more equipped they are to absorb force, okay? So I make the example of, think about something falling out of the cabinet. Let's say a bag of flour, for example. If that were to fall, and I've been strength training for 3 days a week for a consistent amount of time, and I catch it, and now my bones have said force placed on them, I'm probably not going to feel much of the effect of grabbing that bag of flour, right? The answer is yes. So now we do the same exact example in someone who is not strength trained in over 20 years. Granted, are they probably going to experience a fracture? Not really, but they might wake up the next morning feeling pretty sore in the shoulders, right? Why does that happen? Because their muscles aren't equipped to absorb the force, and now they've taken the force on their bones. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, they also increase balance and stability. So when you have more lean muscle mass within your body, it improves not just your strength, but also your coordination and your balance. And this kind of goes back to some of the ability to sit, to stand, to make sure you can actually balance when you change position, right? What that leads to is less risk of falls. Like I said, the leading cause of fractures in older adults, which those fractures usually lead to being put in assisted living. So bone strength and its complexity. Now, I'm not going to dive into this because you guys would get bored, trust me. Okay, but there is a lot more to bone strength than just the density of the bone, is basically what I'm saying. So there's a multiple factors, that play a role. The architecture, or what the bone is made out of, so the scaffolding. Any of you seen pictures of bones where they kind of have that cross-linking going on within them? So what it's arranged with is important. Also, the turnover rate, how actually fast are those bones turning over, or how quickly are the cells regenerating within the bones? But then also nutrient availability, right? We can't leave out nutrition in what we're feeding our bodies, right? We are a product of what we eat. We got told that all throughout childhood. Yes? So, and that's calcium, vitamin D, phosphorus, protein, everything your bones are made of, okay? So in short, muscle contraction and activity, it indirectly affects that entire list I just gave you. So the more we can strength train our musculature, the more our bones are going to be protected and strengthened, okay? So protein, how does it play a role in not just muscle, but also bone health, right? So lean muscle mass depends on adequate protein. Most of us know that, right? Like we eat protein because it helps our muscles both grow, but also repair and heal, correct? Yes, but then it also supports our bone matrix. Why? Because the flexible part of our bones, right? Like a lot of us have gotten into an injury and our bones don't snap every time we get injured, right? Like they have tension or stress ability. They're just not as flexible as our muscles are. So that flexible part of the bone is primarily made of a protein called collagen. And a lot of people think about collagen, right? Because of hair health, nails, skin. But that is also a protein. So we need to supply our body with protein to maintain adequate bone health. Okay. So well, let's make the statement, but without protein, our bones become even more fragile, even if we're getting adequate amounts of calcium. So that was kind of a kickback to mom telling you to drink your milk, but you got to do a little bit more than that. Okay. So tying it all together, your muscle is the load or the stimulus on your bones. Whether you're doing a squat, you're lifting something off the ground, it doesn't matter. Now, your bone is adapting to that stress from the muscles. And your bone density, or how healthy your bones are, is a result of how well your bone is adapting to said load. Okay. So stronger, more active and contracted muscles, they send stronger signals to the bones, telling them to stay dense and stay resilient. The opposite is true when we're not strength training. When weaker, less active and contracted muscles slowly remove that stimulus because it gets weaker and weaker, and the body gradually scales our bone strength down, and we become osteopenic or osteoporotic. Does that make sense? Perfect. So, like I said, we can't really skip food, right? So I'm not going to talk a ton about food, but it is important that we get protein in our diet from whole foods, okay? Now, I know the image looks like I'm anti-whey, I'm anti-big whey. It's not the case, but it's just to show you that, natural whole food sources of protein are always going to outweigh whey proteins and isolates, okay? And I don't care who you talk to, if they don't tell you that, they're lying. The research says it's true. Now, I will say the research will tell you about 1 trillion different numbers on how much protein you should get, okay? But the most consistent number that pops up in the research is about 0.82 grams per pound of your body weight in protein per day. Not just to sustain, but to build muscle too. And that's at any age, okay? So why that's important is because a lot of us probably are just eating protein and we might not know how much we're actually getting or if it's enough, okay? So use that equation if you can to try and determine how well you're doing at that, okay? Now, anyone in the room familiar or not familiar with essential amino acids? Yes, no, maybe so. A little bit, you probably heard the word. Okay, so there's 9 essential amino acids. Your body cannot function without them, period. So we get those 9 essential amino acids through whole source protein, through food. Okay. And we have to get it because our bodies don't produce it. That's why it's essential. Okay. So let's walk through a few different examples. Eggs. A lot of us eat eggs, right? We're in Wisconsin, right? It's 48%, yeah, 48% of utilization. Okay. So, and I'll explain what utilization is. So your body, when it eats a protein, so let's say I eat a 50-gram steak, I'm not actually going to get 50 grams of protein in my body. Why? Because I can't process all of that at once. My body is incapable of doing that. Now, our bodies are smart, but they also do still have ceilings. Okay. So utilization is your body's natural capability to absorb the protein within that food. Okay. Now, eggs, bar none, are the best whole food protein on the market. Now, when I say eggs, I'm talking about pasture-free, walking around eggs. I'm not talking the eggs at Walmart, okay? And now it's not to say that, you eat eggs from Walmart, you're gonna not hit adequate protein. You're just gonna have a lot harder time doing it, okay? So, red meat, poultry, fish, I put approximately because it really depends on what actual red meat, poultry, and fish that you are eating, but about 32% utilization, pretty good source as well. Whey protein, like I said, I'm not anti-whey. You can still have whey protein, just don't use it as a primary protein source. Why? Because it only utilizes about 18% of the protein. And in a protein shake, that's about 25 to 30 grams, 18% of that. If you think about it, that's not a whole lot of protein, right? And you just drank like a whole bunch, and now your stomach's full, and now you don't want to eat anything, right? So why that's important is because your body is smart, right? So what it doesn't use, it will store away for later because that's what your body does. So if it's not using the protein, 82% of it is going to convert it to either sugar or fat. Okay. So again, I'm not saying don't drink whey protein. I'm just saying don't use it as a primary protein source. Okay, now let's dive into just a tiny bit more. So I was a little bit unfair. I talked about meats, right, and eggs. I don't know if anyone in here is a vegan or a vegetarian, so you can still get your protein without eating meats. Now, plant-based proteins, for example, soy pea, about 16% utilization. So if you are going to not eat meats or be vegan or vegetarian, again, nothing against that. You just are going to have to work a little bit harder to get total protein sources within the body. Okay. Now, probably none of the people in this room, maybe Leah, but branched chain amino acids, I was a victim. I bought into them. They were a hot topic on the market, and frankly, they kind of still are. The body doesn't use them at all. Why? Because these branched chain amino acids are incomplete amino acids. Remember how I talked about 9 essential amino acids, right? So those are complete, essential, full amino acids. These branched chains are parts of said essential acids, okay? So when we intake them, they just get flushed out. Our body doesn't use a single part of it. So if I'm gonna say I'm anti-big something, I'm anti-big BCAAs. They're a total scam. Don't buy them. Okay. Not often will I tell people to do that, but that one I feel a little bit more strongly about. So does the food we eat matter? Right. Yes, absolutely it does. So more grass-fed red meats, free range, and more pasture-raised poultry and eggs. Like I said, not Walmart eggs if we can. And trust me, in Wisconsin, you have a lot of accessible sources of doing so instead of going to the grocery store. If you don't know any, we could definitely link you up with some. Okay. Wild caught fish, Alaskan sockeye salmon, trout, you name it. We've got it around here. Again, we're in Wisconsin. We're blessed to have some of that access be a little bit more potent here than if we were maybe on the West Coast. But avoid it at the best you possibly can. Grain fed animal products, they're inflammatory. They don't have as much dense nutrients within them. And like I said, your body's smart. It will store away what for later that it's not using in the form of fat and sugar. And fat and sugar lead to more inflammation. Okay. So let's jump into strength training. What should that look like, right? Because I would make the inclination that my strength training goals would look a little bit different than maybe some of the people in the audience. Yes. Like I said, I'm 27 and I'm previous college athlete, and I have a lot of years, right, before I get into my older years and start to feel personally what aging feels more like, right? So again, I'm not telling you what to do from an all-knowing perspective. I'm telling you what to do based on what I know as a provider, okay? So the 5 most important variables when it comes to strength training, in my opinion, and this is regardless of age, demographic, whatever you want to say, the exercise selection. So what exercises are you doing? Compound movements. Like I said, where we went wrong is we started training for aesthetics. We have to train for life, okay? And what do you want your life to look like? What are you trying to achieve physically? What are some goals that you might be not hitting that you want to hit? And you want to do that through compound movements. So that's squatting, that's hip hinging, that's pushing things, that's pulling things, that's stabilizing your core, and that's working on stability type movements. So really slow, stable movements, okay? Now, why? Because these give the best total return for your muscle health and your bone health. Why? Because if we're doing compound movements that include multiple muscle groups, and we think back to that stress of the muscles being put on the bones, we're achieving a lot more efficiently, right? As opposed to I'm doing one bicep curl and I'm training on one part of one small long bone in my body, right? It's not to bash on curls. You can still do curls. I'm just saying there's better movements that you can do. Okay. Intensity. How hard does it feel? Right. That's pretty subjective because, like I said, my training program might look a little different than somebody else's. Right. So, how hard does it feel for you? You should be ending most of your strength training reps and sets with the ability to do like 1 to 3 more. Right. We don't want to train to failure. Now, there is a lot of hot topic about training to failure. It does have other physiological goals, but if your goal is just to build lean muscle mass, you do not need to train until your body says stop. Okay. Why is that important? Because we want our muscles and our bodies to adapt, right? They're smart. We want them to adapt to our environments. We don't want them to fatigue and then we show up to the gym and we're still tired from last time. Does that make sense? Wonderful. All right. So third, you want to progressively load. You don't want to show up to the gym or whatever active training space you're doing and do the same thing every time. Why? Because your body's smart, right? It's adaptable. And if you do the same thing every single time, you're going to do a couple weeks of that and your body's going to be like, okay, well, I might as well turn the brain off. I already know what's coming up for the next, whether it's 30 minutes all the way up to a couple hours, depending on how long you want to strength train, right? So why that's important is because we want to continue to add either weight, change reps, or controlled range of motion. When I say controlled range of motion, I mean not moving through these movements as fast as you can to just get said workout done, okay? You want to be focused on what you're doing and think about it reflectively. Okay. And where do you find success? Well, small. I take this one. If anyone knows Dr. Kevin Schultz, he's from Lake Cali. He's one of my mentors. His definition of success is small habits performed daily over time, right? We're not going to fix and change everything in our bodies in one day. We have to repeat it at small increments repeatedly. Frequency. So I have some handouts and I'm going to give you two if you would like them at the end of the talk, okay? So they're going to walk you through a few different tracks because like I said, everyone's strength training goals are different. We have a time. I got to respect people's time. 6:01. Okay, I'll get moving. All right. So within those handouts, there's some write-ups, but 2 to 5 strength trainings a week sessions is ideal. Okay, and that's going to depend on what your goals are, right? So if you've never gone to the gym, you probably should not be going to the gym 5 times a week right out the gate. You're going to feel like crap after about day 3. Okay, maybe even day 2. So that will depend on what your actual goals are and your experience within said strength training space. Okay. Now, predictable, repeated, moderate stress sessions, just like anything else in life, is going to be better than one-off extreme sessions, right? Make the example of my broken nose. Some of you might see it, some of you might not. So I made the mistake of thinking I was invincible, as every 27-year-old does. And I went to the gym for the first time in a couple of weeks after we got married, and I decided to pick up right where I left off. Now I made it through the workout, granted, right? I'm 27, I powered through, right? I'm so invincible. But then I was reminded that I'm not, and I had a syncope episode, and I fainted, and my face smacked the concrete floor. Now, don't want anyone to learn as valuable a lesson as I did there, but it's just to make the example that like you don't, if you fall off the wagon, you don't jump right back in where you left off, okay? You slowly introduce these things because that's how your body adapts, okay? Now, recovery. If you're going to take nothing else from this talk, this is the bar none most important thing I can tell you in this talk, okay? Sleep. Sleep is the number one thing you can give your body. It's free, by the way, to sleep. And males, 7 to 8 hours, you should be sleeping. Females, if your man's giving you some trouble, you should be getting at least 1 to 2 hours more. So if he's giving you trouble, give him a little nudge. You need more. You physiologically do. And when I say 7 to, whether that's all the way up to 10 hours, I don't mean sitting on the phone for 25 minutes when you go to bed or scrolling through social media or whatever it is you do. I mean dedicated, turn the lights off, get a cool space, specific sleep. Honor your sleep. It is the number one thing you can do for your body, bar none. There's nothing better you can do for yourself is get consistent, healthy sleep, okay? Why? Because your body actually regenerates. It turns over your cells in the deepest part of sleep. So if you're not getting into the deepest part of sleep, that's not happening, okay? And it's called macrophage production and cellular turnover if you want to be scientific, but just take it for what it is. If you get consistent sleep in the deep parts of sleep, your body will regenerate. Your body's a self-adapting, self-healing machine. And the more you honor that, the more it's going to perform, okay? regardless of age. Okay. Now, offer rest days. Listen to your body. If you are more sore than you were the week prior at that point in your strength training program, take a rest day. Don't push past the limit. Now, don't abuse that, right? Don't just make that an excuse not to get strength training in, however that's going to be for you, but it allows for your bones to remodel and heal well, okay? Hydration as well. Again, can't hit that enough. Why? Because that actually increases your body's ability to repair tissue. So has anyone ever lifted or even done something really active, whether that was, I can make example like spring cleaning or doing yard work around the house, right? You usually feel okay after doing it, right? But maybe a day or two later, feeling a little bit beat up. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. Why that happens is because micro tearing happens within each of your muscles. Okay. Now, how do we combat some of that micro tearing or help it heal faster? Hydration. It's the best way you can do it. And I always make the recommendation, half your body weight in ounces, at least your ideal body weight, I say. So if you're trying to lose some weight, half of the ideal body weight you want to hit. That's where you want to be at for hydration. Day in and day out consistently. Okay. So common mistakes in strength training, overtraining, that's pretty simple, right? Like don't beat your body to a pulp. Listen to it. If it's telling you probably shouldn't be working out, maybe take a break. Changing programs constantly. If you're not staying consistent with something and progressively loading it or progressively making it harder, your body again is going to be really adaptable and it's not going to get as good of a response from said training because you haven't actually stuck to something consistently. Okay. Ignoring technique. I call it ego lifting. I've been a victim of that too. Just because you can move said weight doesn't necessarily mean you moved it well. Okay. So pay attention to your form, whether that's having someone, strength train with you or have something in the mirror or have a recording of yourself. Multiple different techniques you can use to actually determine your form. Not eating enough protein. We talked about that, right? About that 0.82 grams per body weight per pound of body weight. That's just a simple equation you can use. Training consistently, but not progressively. Same thing. If you're going to the gym or doing whatever you're doing for strength training or mobility, and you're doing the same thing every single time, again, your body's adaptable. So it's not going to get as much benefit out of it as it might want to. How do we determine if we're progressing? Okay, right? Because like I said, each one of our strength training or active regimens are going to look different, right? So how do we gauge progress, right? Well, you feel stronger week to week doing your daily tasks, whatever that might be. Something you did last week might not feel as hard as it did this week. It's a good way to gauge it. You recover faster between your workouts, whatever your workouts look like, right? On Tuesday this week, I felt like crap. On Tuesday the next week, okay, I'm still sore, but I feel a little bit better this week, right? Like that's a good example, especially if you're remaining consistent. Your posture and stability begin to improve. Now, that's a tough one to actually notice yourself because you look at yourself in the mirror every single day. When you're looking at something every single day, you become habituated. You get used to seeing it. So pay attention. If other people around you are saying that, believe them because they don't look at you just like you do every day. And we're also all our own worst critic when it comes to that stuff. Body composition also starts to shift. You start to notice more tone, less softness in the musculature, and your bone density changes. It does, but it's a lot slower than your muscle change, right? So if you are someone who is curious about your bone health and you've been significantly strength training, get a comparison DEXA scan. Something you do. They're not super duper expensive, and it's not something you need to do, but if you are curious, it can give you a good evaluation of how well you're doing in improving your bone health. So I didn't talk a lot about chiropractic, but chiropractic, I make the joke, where does it come in? Well, where doesn't it is the better question. So I'm going to read this quote because it's one of my favorites from BJ Palmer. He's the developer of modern chiropractic. If you've been around Lona enough, you've probably heard his name. He said, medicine is the study of disease and what causes man to die. Chiropractic is the study of health and what causes man to live. Okay. So where does chiropractic come in? It improves your range of motion for one. And if anyone knows, when you're strength training, if you're getting a full range of motion, it's always going to be more beneficial to doing half or quarter reps, right? Now, it also improves your ability to have less reasons to not go strength train, right? So if you're in less pain, you're feeling more adaptable, you feel like you're more body mind aware, you feel like you have more energy, are you not more apt to go to the gym? Or go to whatever your workout space is, right? Whether that's yoga, it does not have to just be straight strength training, okay? So I'm going to make an example of fast food. Now, whether you eat fast food or not, I make this example because it really tells us how does chiropractic actually improve our body's ability to communicate with itself. So for example, McDonald's, right? Now, regardless of your stance on eating fast food, right? This is not to tell you guys to go to McDonald's, definitely don't. But now, if you were to go to McDonald's, right, and you order a McChicken through the drive-through, someone's going to talk to you through that speaker, right? Or whether that's any fast food place. Now, think about going to McDonald's, and now nobody on that team within that restaurant or any fast food place has a headset. None of them gets headsets. How well do you think that restaurant's going to function? Pretty terrible, right? We're going to have to run outside, yell at people in their car. We're going to have to run back, yell at the people inside and tell them what the car said. Try to remember that. Now, in this instance, the McDonald's, it's your body. The headsets are your nervous system. So your nervous system is able to communicate a whole lot better when it's on and there and functioning properly than it would otherwise, okay? And what does chiropractic do? It adjusts the spine, specifically dedicated in a way that allows your nervous system to communicate more efficiently throughout the rest of the body. That's the muscles, that's the bones, that's the organs, that's the tissues. Literally everything is controlled by your nervous system. So the more we can do that, the more efficiently your body's going to communicate, it's going to heal, it's going to turn over, it's going to rest, it's going to warn you to rest. Any questions there? Okay, so one more time. Where doesn't chiropractic come in? I'll read this quote as well, because this is a common misconception with chiropractic. Chiropractic is not designed to make you instantly feel better. It is designed to instantly make you heal better. Why? Because your body, again, communicates with itself a lot quicker. Now, symptoms and feeling better certainly are a part of chiropractic, but function and your body's ability to self-regulate and self-heal, much, much deeper part of the iceberg under the water there, okay? So, in essence, everything comes back to your nervous system. Why? Because it controls everything. Your muscle growth, your muscle adaptation, your bone health, your bone adaptation. Now, a note from a mentor as well. I'm going to leave you guys with this after we jump into the last couple slides. So a lot of us, when we're healthy and we feel good, right? We have goals, whether that's, financially, professionally, physically, mentally, right? Most of us have goals in life, yes. But when we're sick, we have one goal, and that is to get healthy. Agreed? Right. So the more we can stay healthy, the more we can actually pursue our goals. So what is your response to this going to be? I can imagine, because you all showed up here today on a Monday evening, you probably had a long day. Mondays are tough, right? But you're all here. That's a giant step. So I applaud each and every one of you for doing that for yourselves, but not just yourselves, but the people that look up to you. Why? Because we're all leaders. I don't care if you think you are or you think you aren't. You are a leader, whether that's to a kid, a grandkid, a parent, a coworker, friend, family member. It does not matter. Someone is looking up to you right now, okay? So the choices you make for yourself are important because someone's watching them all the time, and they're looking up to them, and they're making their choices based on them, okay? So I leave this with this hierarchy. Our thoughts become our actions become our habits define our character, who we are, and our character ultimately defines our legacy or how we were remembered, okay? So I know that was a lot, but the best thing to do is not let analysis paralysis win, okay? Has anyone, show of hands, thought about something they were going to do that was important in life to a point where they thought about all the outcomes that could come of it, to the point where they didn't even do said thing? Anyone in the room? Yeah, I think we all have, right? So the best thing you can do after coming to this talk, because you've already spent the time in investing in yourself and your families and the people who look up to you, is not have analysis paralysis and make said choices in your lifestyles to change what you need to change to hit your lifestyle goals and strength goals and health goals, okay? So what can you do? Well, I have a couple of things or calls to action. Number one, I do have a strength training program. It has 3 different tracks. One is for more experienced people who are ready to jump into a gym or a health space 5 days a week. One is for a 3-week rotation, so more beginner, where we're going twice a week, and once a week on a 3-week rotation. And the middle one is an intermittent or a 2-week rotation, where you're going in for 3 days, 1 week, 2 days the next week, and alternating. And it's written up with different types of sets of strength training movements that you can do, and you do not need a full commercial gym to do some of these movements. So if you have one, great. If not, you can do all these exercise body weight, and you're already going to improve. Why? It's free. That's the best part. Free 99. You guys don't have to pay anything to have that, okay? Right? Free 99. Anybody hear that one before? Anyone can start it, right? And you could start today, you could start tonight, you could start tomorrow, preferably the sooner the better, right? And on these forms, I actually put my personal cell phone number on this so that you can text me, you can email me any comments, questions. Because if you're reading it and you're like, okay, I read it, but I feel like I don't understand what this actually says, I'm there, I'm available. Why? Because I care about this a lot. This is important not just for my generation, the generation ahead of me, the generations that come after me. Because the health space is starting to not really be the health space. And it's frightening, but it's true. And we need to get away from it. Okay. And I think most of you are getting chiropractic care, but if there's someone here that is not, or you are along with someone who is, or you're along with someone who is and you are not, we do have initial evaluations available for the price of $47. It is a special for coming to this talk, and we could set that up for you as early as tomorrow. Those are a couple of my references. I hit the wrong computer. Any questions? I'll open it up. Yes, no, maybe so. Well, that is all right then. Well, thank you for coming to my talk. Thank you for sitting through that. And like I said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns in the future, please reach out via text or email. You do, if you take the strength training program, have my phone number. So thank you again all for coming to the talk. It was great to see so many people here. Yes. They're right here if anyone would like one.
Thank you.
Of course, of course, of course. What did I end? 6:16. Hey, on schedule. I just had to speed up a little bit.
Okay, I do have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Much protein?
0.82 grams per pound of body weight.
0.82
0.82.
per pound.
So you can do a little bit of math.
I can, not in my head.
And most importantly, Jody, you don't want to get that in one meal. You want to spread it out. So however many meals you're eating, right? Because some people intermittent fast, some people eat 3, 4, 5. I'll get to like 8 meals a day, right? So however many you're eating, divide that total by the number of amount of meals you're eating, and
Okay,
then try to hit that 0.82.
Of your goal weight.
Yep,
Okay.
of your goal weight, correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, same with hydration. Hydration is half your body weight in ounces of goal weight, not current weight.
That's funny when you said that, because when I got my driver's license for the first time, I was Wisconsin, I made me see that. Oh, but I'm here.
Good job on biting your tongue. Good job on biting your tongue. Also, Judy, I probably could send slides out too, so that you could sit back on them if you really wanted to. Yes, of course. Good to see you. Hello. Yes.
No.
Which is why when he went in, I looked at the chairs and I was like,
You got a lot of nervous.
oh no.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's awesome.
so that's thing number one. Number two, if I bring in on my next appointment. What I'm going to do.
Strength training stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it would depend on what time you're coming, because if we're seeing a bunch of people at a time, I don't want to be disrespectful of your time and whisk through it. What I could do is I could have you email me it, and then I can give you a more dedicated answer via email, so that I have the time to like sit down and look through it. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, because I.
Okay. I think is my email on here. Email me anytime, and I will look it over. And do you want me to just give feedback on what I think is good and what I think to change, or what are you looking for? Yeah, I can do that. I can absolutely do that.
What I really want is my face to.
So give me a couple of, do you have any specific goals that you're trying to reach right now?
Right now, my specific goal is I've got 2 problem areas of illness. And I'm trying to go through that. Like this morning, I noticed when where the hamstring goes into the butt.
Yeah, so attachment site up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be 5 years.
Okay, yep.
I have one.
Right side, left side, both.
Left side.
Yeah.
When I step up onto a 4-inch step. That causes pain. But when I'm riding my exercise, which is the same mobility, it doesn't.
Interesting. Okay. No?
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I will. Tell you what I do, you can tell me what I should do different.
Yeah, for sure. So can you just one more time, just reiterate to me what? So you're trying to get away from the pain sitting at the top of the hips there? Or?
I'm trying to allow it to heal
Yeah.
and not make it worse,
Okay.
but still the rest of my body so that I don't end up with memories.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, yeah. Well, please do send me what you have, and I can give some recommendations on what I think is great. And then what you might have a chance to maybe load or add a little bit more difficulty to, because like I said, that's the more you can progressively load, the better, because your body's gonna adapt, right? We don't want to show up in the same thing each time. Not saying that you are that way. But the more we can do that, the better. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, I will take a look. Yeah, absolutely. Don't hesitate to send it over, okay? Yeah, it was great to see you this tonight.
Years ago, yeah. Yeah, you know, she was right on, it was, she wanted to do it. Yeah.
So I can't remember.
Yeah, when you're remembering is not, it's hard, right?
And.
Okay.
Like, so I can't do it.
I mean, so, yeah.